Welcome to Comics Expertise. Today I will be talking about a bunch of arguments I have heard on the internet given for why the X titles currently and the previous titles of House of X and Powers of 10 have not been good. Now, there are some things that I've heard that I agree with and a lot of things that I've heard that I don't, and I would just like to respond to those things. So the first thing I want to talk about is the argument that because there is no death in the X titles right now, that there are no stakes. And all I have to say to that, and I'll keep the rebuke of this argument short, is that that's absolutely a matter of opinion. There are plenty of stories in fiction where you already skip ahead to the future. You know who's going to be alive, who isn't. It's not about the end destination. It's about the journey. And comic books, death doesn't matter in that anyway. You know what I'm saying? It just seems like a foolish argument to me that because there's no death, that there are no stakes. That doesn't mean that you can't enjoy the comic. That doesn't mean that there aren't other stakes involved. Now, the next argument I want to address is the argument that Sabretooth's trial was unfair and his sentencing for his crime was wrong. And this is a little less clear-cut because I'm gonna say this. His trial was unfair, but the verdict, what he got, he deserved. You know what I mean? So let me explain. Sabretooth is an unrepentant, murderous psychopath. He's been that way for his entire history in the X-Men. So Magneto sent him out on a mission, told him not to kill anyone. And what does Sabretooth do? He kills people anyway. And then the X-Men get him out of his trial and say, alright, he has diplomatic immunity, only to bring him to Krakoa and say, hey, we just invented this law that says kill no human being or kill no man or murder no man, and you violated that law, a law that didn't exist at the time that you broke it, but we're gonna charge you with this crime retroactively. As far as analyzing Krakoa's justice system, that is unfair. It's not a good representation of how laws should work, but did Sabretooth deserve to be imprisoned given his entire history?
You're goddamn right.
If you were solely judging him on his actions of killing those guards during the mission that Magneto sent him on based on Krakoan law, then no, he didn't deserve that. Alright, so the argument that the X-Men feel like a cult, Jonathan Hickman actually addressed this, and I think he addressed it in a fair and intelligent way. And I'm not one to take Jonathan Hickman's word for anything regarding this story simply because he's the writer. I honestly think that his answer was fair. So let me just recap his answer. As for the reason it seems creepy, well, it feels that way because we did all the resurrections at generally the same time and presented it as ceremonial. It feels religious. It feels other. It feels terrifying, unless you're them, and then it feels ascendant. So this answer pertains particularly to the resurrection scene that we saw in House of X. And when you think about it, it does feel religious, it does feel other, it does feel separatist. You know what I mean? So I understand why it came off as culty. And that's not just to some other people. It came off as culty to me too. That's the very first thing I thought, that this feels off. But it feeling off to me and other people doesn't mean that the whole run feels culty. It's just one moment in that comic. I mean, I grant you there are others, like the fact that they refer to their code names as their, mutant names and their real names as their human names. To me, that's a big pet peeve. But like I said, it's not a big deal. It's only a pet peeve to me because as a person myself who loves my parents when they were alive anyway, I don't feel that taking a nickname or discarding, your born name that your parents gave you is a way to honor them. So when someone like Emma Frost says, call me the White Queen, not Emma, that's my human name, it does feel culty. It does feel other. It does feel separatist. Because, like I said, it's the name your parents gave you. In Emma Frost's case in particular, I doubt she likes her parents, but yeah. Anyway, moving on. The argument is being made that the X-Men are fascist. And I think that people who are making that argument don't necessarily understand what fascism is. And mind you, I'm not a political scientist. I do not study politics, so I'm only qualified to speak on the subject in the sense that I did some research for this video, and I'm going to show you the definition of fascism right now. Alright, so does the Krakoan government exalt nation and race above the individual, and does it stand for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader? So first, it's headed by a 12-person council, not a dictatorial leader, so it doesn't fit the definition of fascism in that sense. It does, however, fit the definition of fascism in the sense that it is a nation that exalts race and national identity. Now, another part of the definition of a fascist government is the forcible suppression of opposition. So, Emma Frost mind-controlled the Russian ambassador into abstaining from voting on Krakoa's sovereignty. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is an evil act. But it's not an evil act that was sanctioned by Professor X and the Quiet Council. I mean, Professor X knew about it after the fact. He let it go after the fact. But the Krakoan government did not order Emma Frost to do this. So you can't put this as evidence that the X-Men are fascist right now. This was Emma Frost taking into her own hands someone else's mind and free will and taking that away from them. So I'll say again, in summary, on this point, you cannot say all of Krakoa is fascist. Yes, there are some X-Men who are doing fascist things like mind controlling people. The Krakoan government does exalt the mutant race, especially Magneto and Apocalypse. They do exalt national identity, again, as evidenced by the fact that they went out of their way to make their own language, and the fact that they do not allow humans on Krakoa, with the exception of Baby Shogo, and it was implied, or outright stated actually by Apocalypse, that he would allow Brian Braddock to step foot on Krakoa. And that was solely so that he could use Brian Braddock for his own ends. But, like I was saying, they don't actually fit the definition of a fascist government because they're also not run by a dictatorial regime. So really, given how they're trying to take over other parts of the world through financial means more than actual physical or mental manipulation, they fit more into a nationalist and capitalist definition of government as opposed to an outright fascist government. So the next thing the detractors to the current X title say is the X-Men are invading other countries even though they want their own borders respected. To that I say the only countries we have seen them invade are Russia and Brazil. And in the case of both countries, they did this in Marauders to get mutant children out of those countries that both countries, again, were pressing into military service against their will. So the X-Men, being superheroes, are not going to give a damn about a country's borders if you're pressing children into military service. So I don't agree with that argument whatsoever. So the next argument, the X-Men are not acting like heroes. See what I just said about them invading Russia and Brazil. They are acting like heroes. And besides, from that point, if you read Fallen Angels, Psylocke and her team are literally going out of their way to protect human children from APOF. So go read Fallen Angels if you want X-Men acting like heroes. On behalf of humans anyway. Alright, so there are too many info pages and people don't like that apparently. To that, I say this. Some of the info pages are funny, some aren't. Some give you information that you would have rather seen on panel. So this argument is completely and utterly subjective to each person. There have been some info pages that I appreciated, and there have been some info pages that I thought, okay, I would have rather have seen that drawn out. I wanted to see that art Like in X-Force, they gave us an info page where they said something along the lines of healer died off panel, and my reaction to that was, well, I wanted to see that. And there's another info page that I hate the most that gives too little information that was completely unnecessary. And that's the info page of Scott Summers' home and the room layout with Jean Grey in the middle of Scott Summers and Wolverine with their rooms being conjoined. So to me, I didn't like that info page. Like I said, it's all subjective. Alright, so the people that say the characterization of some X-Men is off, usually they cite Kitty Pryde being uber violent. I say to that, you're kinda right and you're kinda wrong. It's all subjective. I don't think that Kitty Pryde would be using her phasing powers to phase things into people. She's shown a lot of hesitation in doing that, a lot of remorse in doing that in the past. I think she did it to the Hulk and she was torn up about it. But yeah, another example being Storm's willingness to stab somebody in the eye with a vibranium knife. I mean, yeah, the X-Men who are not usually extremely violent are a little more violent than usual, so that characterization seems off to me. The best example I can think of with that is Beast all of a sudden being willing to torture people. Same with Jean Grey, willing to torture people, or a person in X-Force. To me, that does seem off, but I'm not going to stop reading all the X comics or keep complaining about it over and over again. I'm just going to wait on an explanation. And if there's no explanation, I'll just have to suspend my disbelief because I'm enjoying everything else too much to write off all the X comics just because there are characters who I'm unused to being violent getting a little more violent than they usually are. I will say, someone who has strayed from their previous characterization a lot, and this actually does really, really bug me a lot, is Apocalypse. He's all of a sudden proud of mutants, and to me, that was never his character. He's always been survival of the fittest was his motto, and it didn't matter if you were mutant, human, whatever. He would make you a horseman regardless if you were strong. He would pit mutant against mutant. He would pit mutant against human just to prove which one was stronger. So to me, he's never seemed like he's been proud of the mutant race, and I don't think he would really be down with what's going on right now. But the way Jonathan Hickman writes him and the way Tini Howard write him is he's on the side of Krakoa. So you just gotta put up with that. Suspend your disbelief. That's his character now. Knowing comics, it'll probably go back to him being a bad guy. It's probably going to be revealed, like it's kind of being revealed in Excalibur right now, that he's up to no good. So, characters being off, oh well, wait and see what happens. Alright, the X-Men are engaging in eugenics or genetic engineering. So the definition of eugenics is the science of improving a human population, although in this case it would be mutant population, by controlled breeding to increase the occurrence of desirable heritable characteristics. Have we seen controlled breeding of a mutant for a specific purpose or desirable heritable characteristics? Yes, we have. In Powers of 10 number 6, in entry number 17 of Moira McTaggart's journal, we see the following. He had the most marvelous idea regarding the potential tandem of several mutants and what they could accomplish if they worked in harmony. The only thing we lack is a mutant with the ability to tweak primal matter or give reality as we know it a push. I've used my expertise in genetic modification to find potential matches for Charles Xavier and me to produce such a mutant. There are several possibilities. So Moira McTaggart went out of her way for her and Charles to both have reality-altering mutant offspring. So there is no question that Charles Xavier and Moira McTaggart engaged in eugenics. Now, whether you consider what they did right or wrong, you would have to ask yourself, what have those mutants done? Proteus and Legion. I mean, Proteus is busy helping resurrect dead mutants, although in the past he has killed people. And Legion, I'm not even going to get into that. Now, the genetic engineering is another thing we have seen in Powers of 10. We saw the X-Men team who went to confront Mother Mold all die. And then when they're resurrected, we see that Angel was modified so that he would have his Archangel form, his metal wings, all that. That was an example of genetic engineering. They didn't bring him back in his default body. They brought him back with the genetic modifications of Apocalypse when they could have brought him back as his regular Angel self. Same thing with Penance being able to assume her Penance form, Monet St. Croix. That, as far as I know, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, was not part of her natural mutation. So they genetically modified her to be able to do that. So while beyond the shadow of a doubt, characters have engaged in eugenics and genetic engineering in the X-Men run, why would that stop anyone from enjoying the comic? Tell me that. Does it really matter? Alright, so the argument is being made by some people that there are too many X titles. Marvel is going X-Men crazy and just oversaturating the market with X title after X title after X title. And to that I say, that is not an argument against the comics at all. That is an argument against you not wanting to buy the comics that you don't want to buy. There's someone out there like me who's probably going to get every single X-Men comic that comes out because I'm just that big of a fan. So if you think there are too many X titles, don't buy all of them. No one is making you. To the argument that there's too much setup in the X titles and not enough payoff, I say to that, commercially, these X titles have all been successes as far as I know. They are all critically acclaimed as far as I know. Let me know if I'm wrong. So the writers are doing something right, and this is another complaint that is, again, subjective. I like long-form storytelling. If you don't like things being built up to, wait till it comes out in trade and you can consume the X titles all at once. Alright, so the last argument I want to talk about against the X-Men is that we're reading books not based on the X-Men, but based on imposter X-Men, because these X-Men have no souls and they're just clones. So to that I say, you are right when you really think about it, because if your mind is copied and then you go on living for another second, then you are a different person from that copy. If you go on living another week before your consciousness gets backed up again, then you're even more of a different person. So to have backups of the X-Men's minds put into clone bodies, the body is not so much the issue. It is the fact that you're taking a copy of the mind and putting it into a new body. And that isn't the same person anymore because they went on living and they went on gaining new experiences after that copy was made. So to address the soul, in this fictional universe, souls exist. There's heaven, there's hell, there's a whole bunch of afterlives. So Jonathan Hickman's response to what about the X-Men souls is it's going to be addressed in a future comic, I think X-Men number 7. But in the meantime, they're not explaining it. You're supposed to just go with it. And I have no problem with that. As long as the answer to everything isn't just go with it. If occasionally you have to suspend your disbelief, cool. So this argument that no one should read the X-Men titles and that they're bad because we're not following the actual X-Men, yes, but you're overthinking it so that you can find something to complain about and not like the X-Men titles. If you want to enjoy the comic and your main issue is with the X-Men souls and the fact that they're in clone bodies with copies of their minds, I suggest you just wait till X-Men number 7, and even if you don't find the explanation given in that issue satisfactory, suspend your disbelief. So I made this video not only to respond to the people who have all these complaints about the current X titles, but also in response to the people who don't have complaints about the X titles and who, when they hear the complaints about the X titles, they tell the person complaining they're wrong and give no reason. They give no argument. That's not the way to have civil discourse. If someone tells me they don't like the current X titles, I'm going to ask them why, and then I'm going to refute the reasons they give for not liking the X titles if that argument that they have is something that is not too subjective, if it's something that I can talk to them about. Intelligent discussion is something that I value, and I would hope that anyone on this channel also values that. So that being said, make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment on the video, and I appreciate you guys. Bye.